Good morning. Myself Professor K.N. Somunshi. Today we will see the entity relationship model. Okay, entity relationship model that comes under the database design. Mean that main core subject of this model is that database design. Entity relationship model plays the very important role in the database design. Mean that it mostly used in to create the logical structure of the database. For example, if you want to create the database of the railway reservation, okay, so it is a very complex to create the database of the railway reservation. Okay, before that we need to create the logical structure of that railway reservation. We directly cannot create the database of the railway reservation system. Consider in the all over the India, there are multiple trains that travel from the morning to the evening. So it is a very difficult to maintain the database of that system, and it is a very difficult to create a database of system. Okay, so there is a need to create the logical structure. Okay, so we create your logical structure of the database with the help of the ER model. Okay, so long form of the ER is that entity relationship model. That is used in the database design. Okay, so first point is that what is a ER model? ER model is the model that describes the perception of the real world. Okay, mean that it describes the perception of the real world. For example, of someone doing the transaction in the bank, okay, and he withdraw the money, or many customer that withdraw the money from their particular bank. Okay, so this is a real world activity, and we need to create the structure of that real world activities. Mean that is called as a real object. Okay, so this is called as a real object. Object is called as a entities. So here means that entity relationship model means that it is a perception of the real things. Okay, mean that it is a collection of the object, collection of entities, and the relationship among them. It is called as a ER model. Once again I repeat, ER model means that relationship among the entities, relationship among the object. For example, I will give the one example of the ER model. For example, here is the customer. And customer have ID, customer have the address. Okay, so these are the entities. ID, address are the entities. So this is an example for the object, and it is also called as the entities. Customer have the ID is the one entities, customer have the address, customer have the street, that is the entities of the that customer. Then again loan is the one attributes, and for example loan type, then loan ID is the entities, loan type is the entities. So this is called as the entities, mean that object. Okay, so this is called as a entity relationship model. Next point is that what is the entities? Entities mean that one single things. Entity mean that one single things, or it is a real world activities, real world things. That is called as a entities. Simple example for the entity is that customer ID. For example, my ID is a 101. That is called as a entities. Mean that real world thing, and the communication among that IDs with the another parties. Okay, that is called as a different entities. Okay, so remember that second point is that entities. Okay, entity means that real things, or it is called as a object. For example, object means that multiple attributes. In your bank account there are multiple accounts, then multiple account types, saving account, current account, there are the multiple account type. Okay, next one, use of ER diagram. First use that entity relationship diagram, entity relationship model that used in the database designing. It plays the most important role in the database designing. For example, we do the transaction, we retrieve the data from the database, we delete the any entry, we modify the any entry. So ER model that plays a very important role in the database designing. For example, database designing of any organization, database designing of the Facebook, database designing of the railway reservation system. It is a very important. Okay, so it is the most plays an important role in the database designing. Next one, mapping, entity relationship model that map the real world object into the conceptual object, into the concept, that is called as a mapping. For example, we have draw the any diagram, that is the entity relationship diagram, means that we map the your ID into the conceptual way, that is called as a mapping. Next, logical structure, entity relationship model that facilitate the to use the schema, and using the schema we can create the logical structure of your database. So here entity relationship model that facilitate the to use the schema specification, and using that we can create the logical structure of your ER model. For example, we draw the logical structure here. Customer, then customer have the ID, customer have the street, then their relationship in between the customer and bank account. So this is a bank account, bank. So this is a account number, and this is a type. So this is we can say that this is a sample logical structure in the form of ER model, entity relationship diagram model. So this is a use of your ER model. Next one, we will see the notion of the ER model, mean that some concept of the some issue of the ER model. There are three notions: entity set, relationship set, and attributes. First one is that entity set. Entity set means that it is a collection of objects, collection of entities. For example, we draw the diagram for the entity set. Here is the entity set, one entity set, customer, and customer have the ID. For example, this is the ID. Then customer have street, then customer have the account. So this is called as an entity set. Entity set means that it consists of the collection of attributes, collection of entities. For example, ID is attribute, street is attribute, and account is attribute. That is called as a entity set. Then in entity set, what is the entity? Entity is the real world things. That is called as the entities. Mean that it is an object, collection of object. For example, ID is the one object, then street is the one object, and account is the one object. Entity is a real thing. Okay. So first notion of the ER model is the entity set. That is the first notion of the ER model. Next one, relationship set. Relationship set means that relationship in between the different entity set. For example, one person have the account, and that person have the some information, that is the person have the ID. street, then person have the their home account, then this is the one relation. And another relation is that person have the bank account, mean that person is the interrelated with their bank, that is called as a relationship set. Okay, so relationship set in the ER model, it join with the diamond. Okay, we will use this diamond notation to link your relationship set. For example, this is your entity set, and this is your another entity set. So with that we link with this entity set, mean that it is a inter-processing transaction communication in between the two set, that is called as a relationship set. We show your relationship set using the diamond. So this is called as a relationship set. Next one, third one, that is the attribute of notion of the ER model. Attribute means that for example, one attribute, that is a ID, that is called as an attribute. Then attribute have the value. For example, here is the ID is your attribute, and ID number means that your value 101 is your value. So in entity set, it contains multiple attribute and their value. So there are different types of attributes in ER model that comes under the notion of the ER model. First attribute is that simple attributes. Okay, simple attribute means that ID colon 101. Next attribute is the composite attribute. Okay, for example, person have the multiple attribute, person ID, address, street, that is called as the composite attribute. So this is an example of the composite attribute. So this is an entity set, that is a person, and person have the ID, person have the account, and a person have the street. So this is called as a composite attributes, mean that it consists of the multiple attribute, that is of entity set. So this is a composite attribute. Next one, single and multi-value. Single and multi-value attribute. Single means that, for example, I have mobile number, that is a single attribute. Also I have multiple mobile number, mean that alternative mobile number, that is a multi-value attributes. In database there are some duplicate entry also are there, mean that we find out using this single value and multi-value attribute, that is called as a single value and multi-value attributes. Then derived attributes. Derived attributes mean that, for example, I have the attribute that is a age. Okay, using the age attribute we can calculate your total age. Then we can calculate your duration, we can calculate your timing, mean that timing of the working. Okay, so this is called as a derived. So age is a base attribute. Using that base attribute we can derive the multiple information. So this is a derived attribute. So remember that this is the notion of the ER model that contain the entity set, relationship set, and attribute. And attribute have the sub 4 value, that is a simple, composite, single and multiple and derived. Okay, thank you. In next lecture we will see the ER diagram.